The jockeying has begun over who should replace Karen Webb as New South Wales Police Commissioner after it was announced she will leave her role almost 2 years early. Joining me now is New South Wales Shadow Police Minister and member for Bathurst, Toole. Paul, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Good afternoon, Julia.
Paul, just firstly, what are your reflections on Karen Webb now resigning as Police Commissioner?
Yeah, look, I think it took everybody by surprise. Obviously, the Commissioner was going to make the decision. We're hearing a little bit later this month, but media actually found out that there was going to be a resignation. So they actually exposed that a little bit earlier. But I have to say, when anyone's been in the New South Wales Police Force for 38 years, certainly has given a lot of their time and a lot back in the force throughout this state. I've had the opportunity to work for the Commissioner in her first year. I've got to say that, you know, one thing that I did know was the fact that she deeply cared about the New South Wales Police Force. Together, we were able to put some of the largest incentives in trying to look after the mental health and well-being of our police officers here in New South Wales. We also put incentives in place to make sure that we could attract more police officers into regional and rural New South Wales. There's no doubt the last couple of years with a change of government, there have been some big challenges that they've had to deal with. And, you know, I certainly hope now that, you know, while we're looking for a new Commissioner, that can be done sooner rather than later.
And as you mentioned, there are a lot of achievements during her term in that role, you know, whether it's helping to secure a historic pay rise for officers, establishing, you know, family domestic violence registers. She had to, you know, deal with the Bondi Junction stabbing attack and that spate of anti-Semitic incidents as well, setting up a task force. But what has really stood out as well, on the other hand, has been what was a slow reaction to a lot of these major events to at least come out of front up to the media. We remember back when the great-grandmother Claire Nowland was tasered at her nursing home by a police officer. How important do you think it is moving forward that the next police commissioner, you know, has that ability to front the cameras and front them early?
Well, I think it's a very important role. And when you're actually the top cop here in New South Wales, I think it actually needs to see a police commissioner. Excuse me. It needs to see a police commissioner who's actually, sorry, we need to see a police commissioner who's actually front and centre. We need to see a police commissioner acting like, you know, a premier in many ways, like a minister who's actually out there on the front foot. And the reason for that is to actually send the confidence to the New South Wales Police Force that they are doing a good job. It's also about sending that confidence to the New South Wales public that our police are onto those particular issues. Now, whenever you sit back and you leave it for several days, you leave it for a week, or you leave it for several weeks, then there are lots of unanswered questions, and there's going to be more pressure put onto those individuals. So there's no doubt whoever gets the role as the top cop here in New South Wales will need to be front and centre when it comes to facing the media. They need to be letting everybody know what is happening with our police operations, how our communities can actually feel safe, and how they're actually really ensuring that they're tackling the issues around retaining and attracting more police officers into the force in New South Wales. Morale is low at the moment, Julia, so it does need a bit of a shake-up and does need somebody who's going to be strong and actually get in there, boots and all, to really turn it around.
And dealing with a real shortage in the workforce as well. So who do you think should take on this role now? Quite a few names have been floated.
Yeah, look, you know, I think, you know, I've worked with a lot of fantastic deputy commissioners, assistant commissioners here in the state of New South Wales. Without singling any one of them out, I think we're very lucky that there is a whole host of police officers that will have the ability to be able to be the top cop here in New South Wales. So, you know, I think at the end of the day, we don't want to see the situation whereby the current police commissioner is stepping down. She's saying that she's going to stay on till the 30th of September, and then we're going to see an acting commissioner put in. Now, that means that there's 4 months between now and the end of September. Surely the Minister for Police and the New South Wales government would start the recruitment process now, because what we really need to see is the fact that there is a transition. As soon as the Commissioner retires from the position, we want to make sure that the new Commissioner is ready to start. There should not be a lag. Any lag is actually sending the wrong message to the public, the wrong message to the New South Wales Police Force. But as I said, we're very fortunate here in New South Wales to have some wonderful police officers that are actually been doing some wonderful things at the top already.
Seems a front runner for the race, so is Mal Lanyon, seconded to the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority. Deputy Commissioner David Hudson and they put forward Mick Willing. Surely you have a favourite. You've worked with a lot of these people.
Yeah, look, I've worked with a couple of those names already, and I've got to say the outstanding police officers and outstanding, individuals who can manage people. And, I think at the end of the day, we're going to be in good hands, whoever it might be. But there's three names, fantastic credentials from all three, and there may be others as well that decide to put their hand up for the position. But we really need to make sure that it is a fresh start for a police commissioner here in New South Wales. I think the Premier also, I'm urging him, while we're looking at a fresh start for a police commissioner, it's also an opportunity to have a fresh start by putting a police minister in as well that can actually do the role. A lot of this controversy over the last 2 years has also been at the foot of the police minister here in New South Wales. So I think it's a great opportunity to actually fill both of those roles so that we actually can put our confidence out there in the community, but also confidence in the work that our police are doing as well amongst one another.
I wanted to get your thoughts on another topic. Obviously, we've got a lot happening in terms of leadership in the coalition, federally, Liberal, but also the Nationals. Matt Canavan throwing his hat in the ring to take on that role over David Littleproud. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I've been there before, Julia. So, the Nationals at a federal level did a pretty good job. They, retained all of their seats. Unfortunately, they lost Senator Perrin Davey from the Senate, not getting enough numbers there for her. And it doesn't matter in politics sometimes. You find out who your actual friends are, because it is a movable feast at the end of the day. And I actually found that I was rolled and we only lost one seat in the New South Wales state election, and the Nats did a very good job there. So now that's, down the same path there for David Littleproud. Look, I've got to say, I know Matt Canavan very well too. I think he speaks his mind. I think people want to hear politicians that are actually speaking about the things that matter in their local communities. They want to hear them talking about the things that matter to them. The worst thing is when politicians are talking about themselves. And, I just hope for the sake of both the Liberal Party and the National Party that they get this sorted sooner rather than later, because I think, whilst they want to be leaders, they need to get on with the job of actually developing policies here in the state that are actually going to serve the people of New South Wales and across the country.
Who do you think's better as leader, Canavan, Littleproud?
Oh, look, I think they're both got their own attributes and they've got their own credentials. So, good luck to both of them. And we'll certainly see after Monday who's going to be the leader and continuing on here in the country.
Would you caution the federal coalition against dumping nuclear as a policy?
Well, I think the issue here, Julia, is the fact that when they announced it, back in February of last year, there was only 7 sites that they announced nuclear for. It would have been really important if they got on the front foot and they actually got out there and sold the message and spoke to those communities about how it was going to happen. My community of Lithgow, which is just down the road, they're not opposed to nuclear, but the thing is they don't know what was actually being proposed. And we never heard from any of the politicians from the federal arena. And I think when you leave a void and when you're not talking about those things that are potentially going to occur in people's backyards, that's when there's the rumour mill begins. There's lots of fiction and things that are actually being put out there as well. So I think at the end of the day, that'll be a matter for the federal government. But I have to say as well, if they're claiming that it wasn't going to cost $600 billion, because I think Labor ran a pretty good scare campaign, I just think the coalition at the end of the day at a federal level did a very poor job in actually selling it and actually combating those costs that were being pushed out there in our communities.
So if it was sold better, more detail in communities, you'd advocate for it remaining a policy moving forward?
Well, I think that's a matter where I think we should be looking at lifting the ban here in New South Wales. But I also say that if we're going to be looking at nuclear, there's got to be some more detail behind it. It lacked detail, it lacked information, and we've got to know is it reality or is it fiction? Because we really need to make sure that if we're going to sell it, it's going to need both sides of government at the end of the day on side to be able to go forward with nuclear. We've got the resources here in the state. Let's be clear, wind and solar aren't going to solve the future of our energy here in this country. We're going to be seeing blackouts into the future if we don't actually have a proper energy policy. And just by putting up wind turbines and solar farms across New South Wales, and across this country. That's actually impacting on agricultural land. It's impacting on communities. And where we're seeing a lot of these projects being dumped is in regional Australia. And that's where, our communities are being treated like the dumping ground when it comes to renewable projects. And communities are angry. And it's about time that governments start actually listening to actually looking at other alternatives as to how we can support those communities, across the state. I mean, we should be looking more greatly, at batteries. We should be looking more greatly at providing support for houses to have solar on their roofs. But, the government is actually just, the federal government and even the state government, they're both focused on solar and wind power at the moment. And these turbines, they're not small. We're talking about turbines that are 300 metres high. So some of them, Julia, can be as high as Centrepoint Tower. And I think when you're talking about 50 in a community or 250 in a community, it's changing the landscape and it's actually having huge impacts in those areas.
Now, just really quickly, Paul, we're running out of time. Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price defecting from the Nationals to join the Liberal Party room. Good move, bad move?
Oh, look, that's a matter for Jacinta. I've always found Jacinta Price to be a wonderful individual, someone who was very passionate about regional New South Wales and regional Australia. She's been down in my seat on a number of occasions. I think she's got a great big personality. So, at the end of the day, I think whether she sits in the Liberal Party or she sits in the National Party, we need to make sure that we're using more of her. She's a very talented individual. She's an individual who actually speaks what the average punter wants to hear. None of this, politicians speak at the end of the day. Somebody who's down to earth, knows what the grassroots of people are saying in their local communities. And I think, if she's going to get a greater say through the Liberal Party, then, that's got to be a good thing for the coalition at the end of the day.
Thank you so much for your time, Paul. Big week for the coalition, that's for sure.
Pleasure. Thank you.